very much like to know more about what the issues were that broke apart the Gauḍīya Maṭha and the passing of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvatī, and what was the distinctions between the factions.
Yeah. Oof. Well. All right. Well, the first thing is there was only one philosophical deviation after Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta. There was only one. It only happened once, and in none of the branches that manifested there on Bhaktisiddhanta Road. You've been in Mayapur, you've seen each and every one of those temples. Each and every one of those places is established by a godbrother of Śrīla Prabhupāda. And in none of those temples is to be found a fiber of deviation in philosophy, Siddhanta. They are as uniform as publishing a book. The first book off the press says that the next book behind it says the same. The next book behind it says the same thing. They had one time, and two of the disciples of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta, they created. Śrīla Prabhupada wrote a poem once. It's, Maṭha Maharaj, I want to see if you can find that poem that Śrīla Prabhupada wrote about Nanta Vasudeva. Śrīla Prabhupada wrote a poem after that time, and it's quite incredible. So that caused a great disturbance at that time. He's going to read something about it. That was the time of the philosophical disturbance. Then, prior to that, they had already had another type of disturbance. And as we had heard from Śrīla Prabhupada, their Guru Maharaj, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhanta, wanted them to establish a GBC, a governing body commission, to manage the affairs of the mission. And he did not see anyone fit to be the Acharya. So this is almost verbatim what Śrīla Prabhupada said. So, but he did not establish the GBC during his time. There was no GBC. And then it was his suggestion or order to do that. So, after his disappearance, they did that. They made a GBC on the second day. On the third day, they had a meeting. And the GBC decided there must be an Acharya. It was a GBC decision. Then there were differences of opinion who that should be. Many persons declined the offer. Śrīdhara Mahārāja was one of them. He declined the offer. Pretty much after that, self-nominations were made. Bhaktivinoda Gosvāmī Mahārāja, Maṭha Mahārāja, and Keshav Mahārāja, they proposed that Śrīdhara Mahārāja should be the Acharya. And he declined. And they proposed this again later on after the breakup of Gauḍīya Maṭha, and he declined. And after the breakup of Gauḍīya Maṭha, Śrīla Prabhupāda proposed that. I have, it's in that little book you have, there's a transcribe of that. I have the tape, I've listened to it many times, where Śrīla Prabhupāda says, after the breakup of Gauḍīya Maṭha, I wanted to form another institution, and I wanted to make Śrīdhara Mahārāja the head of that institution. So that was a very powerful opinion amongst the devotees, but he declined the offer from the very beginning. Then there were some self-nominations for that, and of course they had some support also. So, but the first thing, we think they didn't have a GBC and everything just was randomly done after that, but that's just, Śrīla Prabhupāda gave an overview of that. So we face a similar situation. There was a GBC, there were 11 Ritviks, and it's still not clear to this very day, and it's kind of like water under the bridge, doesn't really matter, but people will sit and argue about it, that Śrīla Prabhupada never appointed anybody. So, but there was a GBC, and by the time the GBC meeting was over, they appointed 11. There were 11, appointed them, recognized them, selected them. In the end, Śrīla Mahārāja said, in any case, There must be a leader. And that's obvious. You go to do something, build a house, and 10 able carpenters and electricians show up. Okay, Balakrishna, you take over. No, I don't want to be in charge. And that happens. Somebody is either going to get in charge by tomorrow, or you're not going to be building a house. You're going to be building a barn. You got to get it together. Your walls won't match. 2 guys are coming around and you miss. The house will burn down because the electric's not right. It's just part of human nature. We have to have a leader. So they evolved to this. And in India, you can have presidents, heads, trustees, all you want. In the end, they just look at you and go, who's the guru? Where's Guruji? Where's Acharya-ji? And they see the picture. They see the pictures of Vivekananda, Ramakrishna. Still, there's a head. Oh, okay, that's who started it. Oh, yeah, that's who wrote the book. Who's the man now? Where do we go now? So, and that's a tradition. And there was no stopping that. So, someone could say, well, it's a little unclear ultimately what Śrīla Prabhupāda meant when he said that they didn't make a GBC. They didn't follow Guru Maharaj's orders. I think he was very upset with that, just like many of us are very upset with what happened in Prabhupada's movement. We have our different points of view. We have our different points of view about that. Nonetheless, we see that Śrīla Prabhupada did not cooperate with the GBC. There's been a GBC at Yogapit since day 1. Day 2. And there are letters when Śrīla Prabhupada wrote, years later he wrote to Tirtha Maharaj, the head at Yogapit, and Śrīla Prabhupada had a 3-point program. My books, I want to publish my books. I want to take sannyas. I want to go to America. And he got back a letter which is published in the Lilamrita by Satsvarupa Maharaj. And that letter you could receive today from the GBC. It says, Prabhupada did not want anyone to work independently. First you come here and surrender to the institution. There are many books to be published. Then we will see, and we will see, but first come and submit here. Śrīla Prabhupada went to Keshav Maharaj, took sannyas, got his books, got on the Jaladut, and went to America. If I did the same thing, well, there'd just be a tag on the back of my coat that said renegade. Well, there is. Actually, this coat is called renegade. No, regatta. Renegade. He did the same thing. So it's just such a clear-cut thing. And once you'll see in this book, and it's a known letter, Śrīla Prabhupada was very upset with Śrīla Sridhara Mahārāja one time, and he chastised and said, he and his friends, they have ruined the Gauḍīya Maṭha. But which way they ruined the Gauḍīya Maṭha? We say the bottom line is because he didn't become the Acharya himself. How is it if I figure you, Mataji, Jamunadevi, you ruined ISKCON? The whole thing falls apart and we all bust out of this place for wherever we can head. And I buy a nice farm up here and then I say, please come and be the head of the new mission I'm starting. I mean, it's either contradictory or I'm a madman or what, It doesn't fit in. If he's the man who ruined it all, why would Prabhupada want to make him the head of his new mission that he wanted to develop? It doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is that he was quite upset that time with Śrīla Sridhara Mahārāja. And as God brothers may do, he spoke out very strong. He was angry. He was upset. He felt hurt. Similarly, I have witnessed, and sometimes it has been a little embarrassing, Srila Prabhupada, he also hurt others, Others hurt him, and he also spoke very strong. And he wrote some letters to some of his godbrothers sometime that were just so heavy. And now those disciples have those letters, and they've showed them to me. And they said, you want to see how your Guru Maharaj acted? Look at this. So from our side, we say, well, that's because. But it's just like, hey, that's my Guru he wrote this letter to. We loved our Guru. So it's like the in-house godbrother fighting. It's not an area where we can easily draw definitive, all-time conclusions, because ultimately love is at the bottom of their quarrel. They are intimately connected together as we are through Prabhupada, they are through their guru. So it's not advisable for us to draw such strong definitive lines declaring good and bad and all these things. So that's what happened in brief. And then two persons applied for the seat of the Acharya. And they were unrelenting. There was no one giving in to the other. And their party grouped behind them, and there was no one giving in to the other. No way. No way, no way, no way, no way. We want Kunja Babu. No, wait. We want Ananta Vasudev. So Śrīdhara Mahārāja was a mediator for, I don't read all the time frames, but for quite a while. There was mediation. Finally, because they were just tearing the thing in half. So finally, they resolved a settlement, and he told them, one of you take Yogapith, and Chaitanya Mission means Mayapur. And the other of you take everything else. And then, that was like, 20 ashrams one side, one ashram this side. So one group was very happy for that because 20 ashrams everywhere the preaching. But the other group got Mayapur, Yogapith, and Śrīdhara Mahārāja. It seemed like, well, what kind of division is this? But he saw if the preaching centers are also divided, it's just going to be a mess. But if Mayapur is separate from them, it will give a little more stability to both. And then he said that all these preaching centers, they are born from Mayapur. Mayapur will give birth to new preaching centers. So actually, you have got the better deal. You've got the mother of it all, and more will be born out of that. But Bagh Bazar went on the other side. And then that went on. And everybody remained in the two groups and crossing back and forth. There were many who went back and forth. They weren't with one or the other type of thing. But, just as in ISKCON, there previously, especially in the 80s, there were zones that you could go to. You just weren't welcome. You were from somebody else's zone, You were not welcome there. Because your ideals were different. In one place you were focusing on a farm. Somewhere else it was book distribution. Somewhere else it was, something else. And it just wasn't harmonious for everybody. So it started to develop like that, and there were two distinct organizations. And then in one of them, up to that point there was no philosophical deviation, it was a management problem. And management problem to the point that, yes, Śrīla Prabhupāda said that there was deviation from the overall order of Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta. He felt that. Then there was a problem in Bagh Bazar. And there began to be a series of activities which the devotees felt very uncomfortable with. And it is something that we saw in ISKCON also after the disappearance of Śrīla Prabhupada, and that is the position of the guru became very firmly established. The guru is then surrounded by neophyte enthusiasm. He has a few godbrothers who are very loyal supporters, but then there are others, they just want to go on with their service to Prabhupada, and they're not inimical to the guru, but they're not, charging down the road with the banner shouting Jai Guru Dev. Well, in time, we have seen those people can move on, you see. You're either with me or you're just standing in my way. So this type of thing happened extensively in ISKCON after the disappearance of Śrīla Prabhupada, and it happened there also. So it began with mistreatment of the godbrothers. And Śrīla Mahārāja told us some of the details of that, which are not so important, but giving them bad prasadam and accommodations and just kind of second-rated citizens, you see. So, but that was being tolerated by the God brothers, and with the hope to just keep everything going on. So personal abuses and inconveniences they tolerated. But other things started manifesting, and it wasn't clear. It wasn't clear what's really going on. And then there was a fateful conversation. One day, the head of Bagh Bazar, he called Śrīdhara Mahārāja to his room. This person had been a brahmachari.
This was a Nantavasudeva?
Yeah. Then he had taken sannyas. And what was his name there? Prasad Puri. He was a Puri. He's in many of these pictures. He's everywhere in this book of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, sitting there. The first sannyasi disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he was a Tirtha. He's Pradeep Tirtha, right? Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha. He was a disciple of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. What's his name? Ananta Vasudeva is his brother. He's the brother of Pradeep Tirtha. He's a younger brother, much younger, but he was a dozen times the scholar as Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha. Sometimes we say he was too smart. He was just too smart for himself. Too smart for his own good in the end. So, one day he called Śrīla Mahārāja to his room to discuss, and he asked him, where you got the name Sridhara? Śrīla Mahārāja said, I got from Guru Maharaj when getting initiation. No, I know you. And you go, where that name came from? He said, it's in Guru Maharaj's sloka book, Gaudiya Kantahar. There's one book called Gaudiya Kantahar. What's his name? Kundali printed it about 8, 9, 10 years ago in Vrindavan. It's the preacher's handbook, sloka book for the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. It's a very nice book. It's divided into tattvas. Oftentimes when I go to far places in the world where I just can't drag a library or anything, I just take one book with me, that one. And anything, absolutely anything that comes in your direction, the scriptural reference for it is there, especially nowadays. Nowadays, with in-house confusion of tattva, that's the most definitive book in one place that you can find, Gaudiya Kantahar. So he said, well, that is there in Gaudiya Kantahar and Ashram Tattva. 108 names of sannyasis are there. And then Ananta Vasudeva said, yes, Guru Maharaj and I and someone else, we made all this up. We simply made this up. Actually, it is not real. So then, Śrīla Mahārāja is a little puzzled by his mentality, so he said, yes, Guru Maharaj made that up, and then he quoted a verse from Bhagavatam. What the Paramahansas make up, that's called the Shastra. What comes from them, that is the Shastra. And then this unfortunate person looked at Śrīla Mahārāja and said, well, yes, if he was a Paramahansa. So then they just stared coldly at each other, he said, for a few moments. Then Śrīla Mahārāja just got up, went to his room, got his book, danda and water pot, walked down the stairs and out the door. So that was the little fateful meeting where it came to the head. That thing which they had feared the most and doubted the most was put right in their face. And Śrīla Mahārāja did not have an atom of fighting propensity in him, so he just left, you see. Others, like Keshav Maharaj, they blew the roof off the place. They were very, very outspoken, you know. And in some of the times around there, things got really tough. But anyway, they also left, and Maṭha Maharaj also left, and everybody left. All of Śrīla Prabhupāda's friends left, and Śrīla Prabhupada never went to that place again the rest of his life. He never ever went there. But he kept his group of friends, you see. But just like you and I and others, we don't see each other all the time unless we're just living right there. We get away because of living, what to speak of because of traveling or service, and sannyasis end up in other parts of the world. So they ended up in different places, most of them having their central ashram at Mayapur or something like that, keeping some affiliation and so forth. So that's how it happened, basically. That's an overview of how the troubles started. Philosophical deviation was one. Now, in there, the reasons then, Ananta Vasudeva had a partner in crime, we say. His name was Sundar Vidyavinoda. He was the second most intelligent and learned disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in terms of scripture. Other than, well, there were others. There were three people of which Srila Śrīdhara Mahārāja held the higher title, Shastra Nipunj. It means a scriptural genius. But he was a sannyasi. The other two were brahmacharis. He was a preacher. They were always with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in study, in translation, in such things, research. He was a preacher. So, but generally it was said, when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would give a lecture, then one of these three persons would then sit with the devotees and explain what he had just explained to the devotees. Now, Śrīla Prabhupāda mentions that when my Guru Maharaj spoke, I didn't understand. It wasn't just a humility, it was a fact. It was very difficult. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was not complicating the subject, but it required a deep study and background to keep up with his thought and such things. And so that does not mean that these three had more devotion, that they had more love. It doesn't mean any of that. But they were the three scriptural whips of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. I reckon Srila Śrīdhara Mahārāja knows 10,000 verses if he knows one. He knows things, and I don't know how a person could learn all these things. So these two wrote books against the Gauḍīya Maṭha after they left. The name? There were three. You remember? The Gaudiya Maṭha calls it the trident against Gaudiya Maṭha. And they try to undo everything that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did in the course of these books. They keep them up on a lot of people just go, okay, enough of the argument, where's some nectar. So the books have a lot of preaching in them and things like that, but they are meant to drive the spear deep into Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's movement. I only know 3 Westerners that ever read those books, and they didn't survive. And they're our godbrothers. Pandu, Hiranyagarbha, and I forget the other one's name. Nitai. Nitai. There was another one who became a Babaji and went to Lalit Prasad also. Huh? He showed up in New York a few years ago and kind of was a little normal. Anyway, there were 3 of them. They read this book, they don't survive. Just like Mahaprabhu says, you study Sariraka, you might lose your devotion. Shankaracharya has an intelligence that can defeat yours, and the result will be doubt. So don't go where you cannot stand. You cannot walk across the quicksand. However good a ballet dancer you are, stay out of the quicksand. So there are things that even a Madhyamadakari will struggle with. So better to stay in the safe ground. So they wrote these 3 books. Of course, they never gained much popularity, but they're there in libraries and such things. It's called the Trident against Gaudiya Maṭha. That's what Gaudiya Maṭha called it. Did you find that poem? Give it to me. This is a poem that Śrīla Prabhupāda wrote about this. I don't know the year. Oh, it says, yeah. I'll just read the preluding paragraph. It says, in 1959, our Guru Maharaj, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, wrote a prayer, Shri Viraha Astakam, on the anniversary of the disappearance of Srila Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, wherein we find a reference to the disciples who had rejected their guru. Srila Prabhupada wrote, and this is, of course, translated from Bengali. I think it's translated from Bengali. It might have been actually in the English. I don't remember. One of your closest disciples, whose cup you lovingly filled to the brim with the deathless nectar of your instructions, has ungratefully thrown away that chalice. And his regrettable preference for infectious poison has resulted in an epidemic of Sahajiism. It seems that the prize valiantly acquired by the triumphant lion has at present been unscrupulously stolen by a jackal. The oppressive forces of nescience have reduced everyone to tears, and it appears that each of the young lions has again become a mouse. So first he speaks one of your young disciples, but then he had his co-worker. So then he says, in the end, it appears that each of the young lions has again become a mouse. In the end, one of them suicided, the other one just vanished into oblivion. But that took many years for that to happen. So, I didn't mark the page. Anyway, if you want to see that, and it's there in this book. So, one reason why Śrīla Prabhupāda didn't talk about these things hardly at all, because they were very painful for them to discuss. He said, it is sad, it is embarrassing. And he didn't go on. Then someone will say, well, why are you talking about it? Well, it isn't like we just talk about this all the time. Neither is it like this is the only thing we've done in the last 24 years. But certain things have arisen, and if you don't know what has happened, it's kind of like a big gap there, and it's like, well, why are things the way they are? What's what? You see, when you learn something about what happened here in this valley where you live, in the country where you live, over the time, you kind of gain an appreciation for what you have or what you don't have or whatever it may be. History has its value, you see. So, one thing is we learn from history, try not to make the same mistakes. But it seems that we've learned these histories a little too late because we repeated all the same mistakes times 10 or 20 or, multiplied, not lessified, multiplied, you see. So it came to the point, now they have to unravel Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta. So then they take up some of the old tricks of the trade between various sampradayas, and they start to reject things like Chaitanya Upanishad. No Chaitanya Upanishad, simply a fabrication, they say, because this was a hidden scripture. It was not everywhere. So then they deny its rising to the surface. Then their biggest complaint was Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta reinitiated some of the disciples of Bipin Bihari Goswami, who was the guru of Bhaktivinoda. Now you write that on a piece of paper and you try to figure that out. Bhaktivinoda's guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami. Diksha Guru. And Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, he reinitiates, actually it was only one, but he reinitiates the guru, a disciple of the guru of Bhaktivinoda. His picture is also in here. He's a very big man standing behind Bhakti Siddhanta. His name was Bharati Maharaj. What's his first name? Bhakti Vigyan Bharati? Or? Bhakti Vigyan Bharati. And furthermore, he called the guru of Bhaktivinoda, this Diksha Guru, Bipin Bihari Goswami, Jati Goshai, Sahajiya Guru. And nobody in Gauḍīya Maṭha, none of the disciples give a fig about this Bipin Bihari Goswami, and in a cultural way there's some respect, but after that, they just broom him out the door. Jagannath Das Babaji is the guru of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And there's a long history of Bipin Bihari Goswami criticizing Raghunath Das Goswami. He tried to put his foot on Bhaktivinoda Thakura's head, and when Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta was 7 years old, as Bhaktivinoda paid his obeisances to him. Bipin Bihari tried to put his foot on Bhaktivinoda's head. Then Bhaktivinoda moved back and stood up. So he didn't succeed in doing that. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta looked right at him when he was 7 years old and said, "Do you think you can put your foot on the head of Bhaktivinoda?" At 7 years old, he chastised Bipin Bihari Goswami. And one time, one of the disciples of Bipin Bihari Goswami came to see Bhaktivinoda, and Bhaktisiddhanta was there in the house compound, and the father was standing there talking, and he was at a distance, and he paid his obeisances, and he just turned and went the other direction. So the man said, "It is one of your sons, fourth son of Bhaktivinoda." "Yes." "Oh, why he's only giving obeisances and going away?" Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, "Because he's taken a vow not to go within 100 feet of a sahajiya." So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was rough and tough from the very beginning. He almost got himself killed. How he ended up in Mayapur is he was fighting so heavily with these people in Jagannath Puri that Bhaktivinoda feared for his life and sent him, "You go to Mayapur. This is getting out of control." He was fighting with Nitai Gaur Radhe Shyam community, who had acquired many of the places of Mahaprabhu's pastimes like Gambhira. And he was unrelenting. Only he wanted the truth. Nothing less. Nothing more, just the truth. And he had descended, as we show in this picture with the compliments of the BBT. Here's the Sankirtan of Mahaprabhu. This is his Sankirtan actually performed in Jagannath Puri. And this artistically, what this is saying is from this group, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta has come to the world. From the inner circle of the followers of Mahaprabhu, not followers, associates, he has come down to this world to reestablish Mahaprabhu's mission. So he started that from, the time he was a child, actually.